Mic check, 1, 2. Hello, everyone. Just going to give everyone just a moment. Thank you so much for coming. I'm very excited for the 2023 David R. Keller Environmental Ethics Symposium. And yeah, I really appreciate you all being here. And I just wanted to say a few words before we get to our first panel that I'm really excited about. I wanted to highlight different perspectives on the environment, right? Like artistic perspectives, management perspectives, business perspectives, right? Because nature is kind of a complex thing, and we just kind of wanted to kind of highlight how different it can be depending on what your goals are or what your background is. So we'll have sessions all day, every hour until 2 p.m. today. I want to just highlight two sessions in particular. One is our keynote by Dr. Danielle Andrus from the U at 11. Which is on indigenous land ethics in the nuclear West. So I think that's going to be super exciting. She just published a book on that. So if you can, I would encourage you to come back for that. If you're not tempted by intellectual arguments, there is also going to be pizza at 1. So it's going to be both mind and body, and we're going to have I think a really nice open-ended, like kind of poetry discussion session, right? So it's going to be something a little different, where we're just going to chat and eat and engage with the environment in a kind of poetic way. So I think that's going to be really cool. I guess I also should introduce myself, which I always forget. My name is Thomas Bretz. I'm the environmental ethics fellow at the Center for the Study of Ethics, who is organizing this symposium. And yeah, my area of specialty is environmental ethics. And I did want to just say a few words about the symposium and why it's called the David R. Keller Symposium. It is named after the late David R. Keller, who passed away sadly in 2013. And he was, like me, an environmental ethicist, and he really, I think, was like somebody who, with his heart and soul, was engaged in environmental and sustainability issues in Utah County and at UVU. And I think it's fair to say that not just will we not have the symposium today, but I think sustainability in general would look very differently at UVU without David's tireless work, which, even though he was a philosopher and environmental ethicist by training, really spanned disciplines, right? He worked with scientists, he worked with policymakers, and he actually also was the director of the Center for the Study of Ethics from 1999 until his untimely passing in 2013. I want to maybe mention one final thing about David, who really was like a beloved colleague and friend at UVU, and that is that in 2019, actually, through a collaborative effort, we managed to actually publish a book posthumously that David had been working on all his life, and it's called Ecology and Justice. So if you want to check that out, right, it's, I think, a really great book if you want to kind of know, something about the current state of environmental ethics. And last but not least, I do also really want to thank David's family, the Kellers, right, who really, have shown continuous and steadfast support, right, to this event, but also to the Center for the Study of Ethics. By being here, showing up, they're going to be here later, and also through the Keller Family Foundation. So maybe let's give them a round of applause, because yeah. Yeah, I think that's all I had to say. So now, without further ado, I'm super excited about this session, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Hilary Hungerford.
Thank you. You almost got the shepherds. The shepherds saying, time's up. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to say hello and hand it off to our guests. I'm Dr. Hilary Hungerford in the Department of Earth Science. So happy to have you. We have two awesome guests. These are both organizations that I really admire and do so much great work in terms of protecting and really facilitating public enjoyment of our amazing Utah spaces. So I'll let each person introduce and then come up and do the presentations. Or you can just come up, introduce yourself as you present. How about that? Okay.
I'm happy just to hold it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, then I can move around. Okay, well, good. Thanks, Hilary, and thank you for the invitation, Hilary, into the department here. I'll introduce myself. I'm Chad Linebaugh. I'm the president and general manager of Sundance Resort. Maybe most importantly, I am a UVU grad, 1999, which I realize is probably longer, or before some of you were even born. Thank you for the applause, by the way. But yeah, I started here at UVU, and it's while I was here that they created the first four-year program. So I joined the business management program. At that time, I believe there were four-year programs, but I was so happy to do my 4 years here at UVU, and it's great. But really appreciate being with all of you this morning. I said to Hilary two things. I'll be asked to speak at different things from time to time. I've had to learn to say no to a lot of things. But when it's UVU, or when it's about the environment, I'm like, yes, I'm happy to. So I'm very happy to be with all of you this morning. I feel like hopefully Sundance and what I'll share with you is hopefully inspiring. It hopefully will open your mind to how a for-profit business can impact the environment in a positive way. So I know I'm going to take about 10-15 minutes and then we'll move on. So I'll be a little bit quick here, but I just want to run through a few slides. To understand Sundance and our environmental efforts, you've got to understand the story of Sundance. And most of you probably know, but Robert Redford, who's pictured here, young Robert Redford. And by the way, I've learned that anybody under the age of 30 nowadays, they might not know who Robert Redford is. So let me first of all just kind of show this. This is a more recent photo of Robert Redford. Back when he was in his mid-20s, he became a pretty big actor, became a very large actor. He's been in over 70 films, either as an actor, producer. Maybe younger people you might know, he was in the film Captain America, Winter Soldier. He played Alexander Pierce, which I think means he was in the, the Marvel universe. I've got one of my sons who's a big Marvel person. Anybody here a Marvel person? You slip, okay, 1, 2. So anyways, that's how some people know him. But Robert Redford, let me just tell you his story very quickly and how he came to be the owner of Sundance, because and I'll kind of highlight to me what the biggest environmental initiative of Sundance is by telling you this story. So Robert Redford grew up in Southern California, but he was a good enough baseball player that he got a scholarship to play at the University of Colorado in Boulder. This was in 1956, so this is a long time ago. And on one of his drives from Colorado going back to California, he drove through Provo Canyon. And he noticed the right-hand turn going up what we call Sundance Canyon now, officially called the North Fork Canyon. And he loves to wander. When he takes road trips, he loves to take the less beaten path and just explore. So again, 1956, college student, drives up North Fork Canyon. He sees Mount Timpanogos and thought it was one of the most beautiful mountains he'd ever seen. And he truly felt a connection and thought, I want to put roots down here. Well, about a year later, he was living in California. He had been kicked off the baseball team, dropped out of college, which is what you shouldn't do, stay in college. He was living back in California, and he meets and falls in love with a young lady. And guess where she was from? So I heard it somebody, Provo. Yes, she was from Provo, Utah. So isn't that interesting that he sees this area in California a year later, meets this young woman from Provo, marries her in 1958. Her name was Lola. He and Lola in 1961 purchased 2 acres of land at Sundance. Of course, it wasn't called Sundance then, but they purchased their first 2 acres of land up there. Anybody want to guess what they paid for 2 acres of land in 1961? $14. It wasn't quite that good of a deal, but yeah, that's an amazing deal. But even this $500, so $250 an acre, not too bad, right? Wouldn't you all love to buy an acre of land at Sundance for $250? Today they're about $1 million, and there's only a few left. So that's how he became a 2-acre landowner and then over the course of a few years, this is the important part of the story, he started hearing rumors that the Stewart family, who owned the 5,000 acres that we call Sundance today, they were being approached by developers. And Robert Redford literally would lose sleep at night thinking, what if the wrong person or people get a hold of this land and it just becomes overdeveloped? So in 1968, he approaches the Stewart family, and keep in mind, he was kind of an actor at this point, but didn't have a lot of money. He wasn't a very successful actor. So he approached the Stewart family and he said, hey, if you're going to sell this land, I want to buy it. I'm trying to remember his age. He was in his late 20s or early 30s at this point, didn't have a lot of money, really put himself and his family at financial risk to secure the 5,000 acres, and that was 1968. Now, I like to emphasize to people, and especially to this group here, that Robert Redford did not acquire that land because he wanted to own a ski resort, because he wanted to have a hotel, restaurant, spa, everything that we are today. That's not why. Why did he want to buy that land? He bought it because he wanted to preserve it. That was first and foremost. Well, then some people might say, well, yeah, but you guys are a ski resort. You've built buildings. Well, yeah, but to be, to be sustainable as a business, you do have to do moderate or development in the right way. So we've done that over the years. But the reason he bought it was to preserve it. And I oftentimes think back, what if somebody else would have bought that land in 1968? What would it look like today? I think it would look very, very different, right? But here's maybe the most important part of the whole presentation that I'll tell you, is of the 5,000 acres today, 2,700 acres, so over half of that land, has been put into conservation easements, open space agreements, which is very generous of the Redford family all those years, because that means that that land is forever protected. So it means the development value of that land is gone, but it means it's protected. So to me, that's the generous gift that Robert Redford and his family have given all of us, that we have that peace of mind that that canyon, that area, should really look like it looks today for generations to come. Now, side note, Robert Redford sold the business about 3 years ago. I've worked there for 29 years, so I had the benefit of working with him directly for a lot of years. He and his family came to the conclusion back in about 2017, he's 87 years old now. They thought, we should pass this on to the next steward of ownership. And so we went through this extensive process, found this investment group who is very much environmentally like-minded, and they purchased the resort based on that understanding and based on that commitment to honor all those conservation easements, open space agreements. So even though we're under new ownership, our mission continues to be the same, which is all about preservation. All right, so let me just show you, these are just a few slides. I think most of you know what Sundance is. We're a recreational community, an arts community, and you can kind of see some different photos here. These are all kind of older photos from the early days. This slide here will show kind of more recent photos of today and kind of what it looks like. We do the summer theater, we do, of course, skiing and weddings. In fact, if anyone's looking to get married, look at that spot on the right-hand side. That's a new area where we can do wedding ceremonies. By the way, we had a wedding here this summer, and so we don't have a TikTok account. I know TikTok's kind of controversial, but somebody at the wedding filmed it, and it went viral on TikTok. And we got 200 phone calls the next day from people all over the country like, we want to get married here, So that's kind of the power of nature, right? When you see that backdrop of Mount Timpanogos, pretty incredible. But, we have the lodging rooms. We have about 95 rooms that we operate like a hotel. We have all kinds of activities, fly fishing, horseback riding, and of course, skiing. So that's a little bit about what Sundance is as a business. Now, today we're here to talk about environmental ethics. How do we protect the environment? This map shows you roughly, you can see this is Utah Valley, obviously right here. We're probably right in here in Orem. Here's Provo Canyon. And this gives you a sense of the land, which again, over 2,700 acres of the 5,000 acres is protected. Beyond that, we border 245,000 acres of national forest land. So I think today, and certainly future generations, this continues to become one of the most special places because of the preservation and really our neighboring partnership with the Forest Service. What I'll do, I know it's kind of hard to see here, but you can kind of see there's different pieces of the conservation easements, and I'll kind of walk through and show some photos of those different spots in a little more detail here. So the first one is the Redford Family Wildlife Preserve. This one's interesting. This one is actually, as you're driving up the Alpine Loop, you get there kind of by Aspen Grove, and there's actually the pay booth for the National Forest, right? And you pay. What people don't realize is you keep driving, and all that property for about the next 2 miles is still this property. The pay booth technically should probably be a little bit higher, but that is still all private land there until you get into the Forest Service land. And that's that 864-acre parcel that's listed there. There's a photo of it, part of that land. The next one is 316 acres of what we call the Elk Meadows Preserve. Have any of you cross-country skied or snowshoed at Sundance on our trails there? Maybe a couple of you? Okay, great. So that land is this parcel here called Elk Meadows. And as you know, you get up to that beautiful high mountain meadow where you can Nordic ski and cross-country and snowshoe. That's actually, when we announced the sale from Redford to our new ownership group, we actually did this dedication of these 316 acres. So that was just about 2.5 years ago that we added that in. Another one would be, actually let me see here. Oh yeah, as part of that, what's interesting, this is to prompt me and remind me, how many of you have hiked to Stewart Falls from Aspen Grove? Have you hiked? Most people hike it from Aspen Grove, which is kind of the right way to do it. So you drive up to Aspen Grove Park, you begin that hike on National Forest land, and then like 90% of that hike is actually on the Sundance Preserve land, which people don't realize. And then when you end up at Stewart Falls, the falls itself is, of course, National Forest. So the Redfords, for all these decades, have left that open to the public as well. And of course, we plan to continue to do that as our company today. But just wanted to mention that as well, that to me that's an example of private land in a conservation easement being left open to the public in cooperation with the Forest Service. Another one is what we call the Sundance Preserve land. This incorporates parts of our ski mountain. This is a big chunk. This is 1,547 acres. This photo is taken from a trail that we just opened, and if you follow our social media, hopefully you saw some promotion of this this year, because it's a new trail we opened called Pawnee Cavets, which is a Ute term that in the Ute language means look over there. We literally, when we developed this trail, we had a Ute elder up there who gave us a blessing on the land. And I said to him, I'm like, what would a good name of this be? And he said that word, and I'm like, well, what does that mean? And so we used that name, Pawnee Cavets. And I would encourage you, I'd welcome you to come and hike that. When our lift is running, you ride the lift halfway up and then hike over. But even this time of the year when the lift isn't running, you can park in the upper parking lot of Sundance and just hike this trail up and back. It's about a 3-mile round trip, and these are the views that you get, and that's on this preserved land. There's a Stewart family preserve. So again, the Stewart family is who homesteaded the area. They took a portion of their land. I think that's actually an interesting example that sometimes when you have people or companies who start putting land into easements, it inspires others. And that's what happened here, and we appreciate the Stewart family for also taking some of their land and putting it into an easement. Now, another highlight I wanted to share with you as far as some environmental efforts would be the bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep were native to this canyon and this area, but they became extinct in 1927. And one day Robert Redford said, we've got to reintroduce bighorn sheep here. So this effort went underway to raise some funds, worked with the state, and literally they went down and they, I hope I say this the right way, they captured, or that sounds, they gathered, I don't know, they gathered bighorn sheep down near Green River area and relocated them. I think that's an upgrade. I mean, Green River's beautiful, right? But it's like, hey, come live in the mountains where you're supposed to be. And reintroduced the bighorn sheep. This was back in 1998. I can remember because my oldest son was a baby then. That was the year he was born. So it was 1998. And now when you hike Mount Timpanogos and if you see these bighorn sheep, that's a result of Sundance's efforts and Robert Redford's desire. Okay, another thing I wanted to mention, and I told Hilary this, and this is a great opportunity for all of you, but we've created a new nonprofit called Sundance Nature Alliance. We are a for-profit business, but we have a nonprofit that helps us with all of our environmental initiatives, and through that nonprofit, we do different programming events. And you can see this list, and these are all complimentary, by the way. A lot of these have taken place, but you'll see this coming Saturday, October 28th, we've got a film called Path of the Panther, which is about the Panthers in Florida, which is an incredible film. It'll be in our screening room theater where the Sundance Film Festival takes place. It's complimentary. You can just come up this Saturday, 6 o'clock, and enjoy that film. So please engage with Sundance Nature Alliance and kind of keep an eye on their website, which is listed there for future programming events with Sundance. Okay, lastly, I'm almost out of time. Just a few of our initiatives at Sundance as far as what we do environmentally. Years ago, kind of before everybody else was doing this, we eliminated all single-use plastics, so you will not find a plastic water bottle on Sundance's property. We don't sell them, we don't serve them, we don't use them, and that's just very important to us, and you'll see kind of some stats there, and not just water bottles, but coffee stirrers, straws, whatever is a single-use plastic, we eliminated from our operation years ago. Energy, we purchase renewable energy offsets, so we are able to say we offset 100% of our energy usage through renewable energy. Once again, we are a for-profit business. We run a ski resort. We have chairlifts. We do consume energy, but we're happy we can say we offset that with renewable credits. And then carpooling, of course, is a really big one. In fact, just yesterday, if you follow our Instagram, we put a little video out there talking about we expanded our parking lot, 80 new parking spaces this year. I'm always nervous on social media. You put things out there and there's comments. Most comments are positive. Some people are upset with us. Let me ask you the question. Why do you think we charge for parking at Sundance on busy ski days nowadays? Why do we charge for parking on busy ski days? Yes?
There's a shuttle that goes.
And there's a shuttle that goes to Sundance, yes. So kind of what I'm trying to get at. Do you think we charge for parking because we want to make money off of parking? No. I promise you that's not the case. We charge for parking on busy days because we want to change consumers' behavior. We want less cars in the canyon. So we always have these carpool incentives. If you're 4 or more in a car, you do not pay to park at Sundance on a busy day when we're charging others to park. So it's really changing consumers' behavior. Okay, that's it. I want to wrap up. So we have time for our next presentation and questions, but excited to take any questions that you might have here in a moment. And thank you again for letting me be here.
Let's see. All right. Well, I want to apologize because I don't think my presentation is going to be quite as interesting as Chad's. I don't have any actors or downhill skiing, but I do think there's a really interesting contrast in how Chad and his group are able to manage private lands and how we manage public lands. So my name is Ben Stireman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And I want to talk to you a little bit about sovereign lands and some of the lands we manage. So we're part of the Department of Natural Resources, and sovereign lands are the lands that lie below the ordinary high water mark of navigable bodies of water at the date of statehood and owned by the state by virtue of its sovereignty. So we manage the Utah portions of Bear Lake, Bear River, and then the entirety of Great Salt Lake, Jordan River, Utah Lake, and then portions of the Green and Colorado rivers. That's about 1.5 million acres of lake bed and riverbed, and about 2,200 miles of shoreline. We also manage the state's mineral estate, so everything but Sitla's land, and we generate about $5 to $11 million a year in revenue off of that. A lot of that comes from Great Salt Lake, and I can touch a little bit on how we balance that later. And then we also have a lot of upland lands, like the Moab Exchange lands, which we exchanged out of some national parks with the federal government in exchange for these. Fremont Island, and then the Galena-Sunkani Preserve, and then several upland parcels that are smaller but complement some of the sovereign lands that we manage. So how are sovereign lands managed? We manage under the public trust doctrine and multiple use sustained yield principles. So we regulate the uses on and above the beds of these navigable water bodies, and we have to balance that against different public interests. So scenic beauty, water quality, all of those environment and ecological services are all balanced against any proposed uses. So multiple use and sustained yield means that we're managing for the needs of today and the future, but in a sustainable fashion that's going to continue to provide for the people of the state. So I wanted to explain a little bit about the public trust doctrine. It's a legal principle with roots dating back to the ancient Roman law. It was adopted by the Magna Carta and again into English common law, and then adopted by U.S. law. These principles establish that navigable waterways are a common resource. So much like the air that we breathe, they shouldn't be privatized, they belong to the people. And I wanted to touch on this because I think that's important about how we manage these lands and some of these ethics that I think Hilary was interested in discussing today. So I want to dive into how the public trust and sovereign lands aspects affect our management of these lands. Great Salt Lake, I'm sure you've seen a lot about it in the news. It consumes 97% of the time that I spend in my position. But as you can see from this graphic, we're balancing the economic necessity of some of the needs for the state, the people who produce minerals on the Great Salt Lake, brine shrimp, other things, with the environment and the ecology. I don't expect that you're going to be able to read this, but I wanted to show you just how complex this is. So this is out of our comprehensive management plan, and one of the ways that we accomplish this balance of the different needs of the people, the ecology, the environment, is by recognizing where those beneficial uses thrive. So again, don't try to read it, but in between those two big red lines and where the most green occurs, that's an elevation of Great Salt Lake. And between an elevation of 4198 and 4205 above sea level, that's where most of the beneficial uses are thriving. 3 feet above that and 3 feet below that range is where we start to see degradation of those beneficial uses. And then anything above 4208 and below 4195 is where we really start to see degradation. Today we're at 4192.2, so we're not in a good spot, and it's something that we're taking very seriously. This is a condensed version of our salinity matrix. It's similar to the elevation matrix that I showed, but this takes into consideration the kind of the happy spot for salinity on the lake. The lake is divided into two, so in the north arm, salinity is not much of a factor because it's so concentrated that the sodium is actually falling out of the water. It can't take on any more salinity. But in the south arm, that's where really the bulk of the ecosystem benefits come from. So we're really worried about what that salinity looks like in the south arm. We want to stay somewhere between about 120 to 160 grams per liter, but that 120 low end is taking into account some of the economic needs. So mineral industry who produces critical minerals for the state. We have all of the magnesium in the United States is produced from one company here on the Great Salt Lake. We have a massive resource of lithium. So if you like the idea of electric cars and energy storage, we need to get the lithium from somewhere. And I don't know about you all, but I think that it's the most responsible way to do that is to own that and have that happen right here in our backyard and make sure that that use is not degrading the environment and find that balance. So this is something that we're attempting to do, and we've actually released draft rules of our lithium, well, the process that folks would have to go through to extract lithium on the lake. It's open for public comment now, so you're welcome to visit our website and see what we have going, but it's 37 pages of process. We've made it really process driven so we can make sure that there are no negative impacts to the lake. I wanted to also touch on some of the other management actions that we take. This hit the news quite a bit when we were doing this because we were at a threshold where the lake was about to hit a tipping point. The ecosystem in the south arm was about to collapse, and that we're affecting not only the people who live here, but also more than 10 million birds who visit the Great Salt Lake annually, an entire brine shrimp industry. Things that that you don't see every day, like the brine flies that you go out there and they might be annoying, but they're crucial for many of the birds who live here and that visit their lake. So with that in mind, one of the solutions that we had, because we can't control drought, and honestly our division doesn't even get to control how much water comes to the lake, so we had to react within what the tools that we had available. And there's a causeway that Union Pacific constructed back in early 1900s and then again reconstructed to make a rockfill causeway that effectively makes two separate lakes. So all of the inflows come into the south arm. So we have this salinity committee that got together and decided that it might be good to actually build a berm or a dam almost to keep all of the waters that flow into the south arm in the south arm. And this helps to dilute the salinity in the south arm. And what happened was when we hit the record low lake level back in November, the salinity also hit a high level that again was about to that tipping point at 185 grams per liter, far above the threshold of where we wanted to be. And when we built this and had, part of it was, we can attribute to a great snowpack, but we honestly didn't get as much into the lake as I would have liked because of all the empty reservoirs. So we got maybe an additional 20% inflows into the lake than we do on average. But what we saw is we went from 185 grams per liter all the way down into the 120 range. So that puts us in a really good spot moving forward and allows us to manage this and manipulate the salinity to try to meet some of the needs of the lake. So it's not perfect, and we would love to see the lake back in that beneficial elevation range where we don't have to manipulate this berm and modify that salinity. But for the time being, this is what we're doing to try to ride along until we can come up with some long-term sustainable solutions. I also wanted to talk about what we have here in our backyard. Utah Lake is important to Utah County, and it's also important to the ecosystem, to the environment. And you all probably heard about the Islands project that was proposed. And when I talk about the public trust, these lands truly belong to you all. These are your lands. We simply manage them for you. So when this project was proposed, it took some time, but in 2022, some legislation was passed that allowed our division to make a recommendation or not a recommendation to the legislature based on this proposal. And we decided that we couldn't recommend this to the legislature because it posed an infringement of the public trust doctrine and an infringement of the public's right to access these lands. So ultimately, we canceled the application for the island project. Thank you. It's something that I think I think it was necessary, and hopefully there are other ways that we can, improve Utah Lake, but I think we need to do it in a way that is transparent and has public involvement. So anyway, I don't have much else to say about that. I want to thank you for letting me come speak with you today, and then also invite you to participate in our comprehensive management planning. This will be the next step for Utah Lake, where we decide what the future of the lake looks like and how we regulate those uses. So anyway, thank you for having me today.
Thank you both, Ben and Chad. Just so many exciting things going on with both of your organizations. So we have a lot of time for questions, and I know there's so many interested students here. But really quick, I forgot at first to remind you all that it's Sustainability Week at UVU. And there's lots of cool things going on all week. We have a poster in the back if you want to see what's going on Thursday and Friday. But yes, we'll have questions, and then we'll have some microphones. So it's being recorded, so you can ask your question to the microphone. Who would like to go first? Yes. Is it about Marvel?
No, it's not. It's not. It's a question about what you're sharing. Although Robert Redford is one of my, he's a cool actor. I think he's awesome. One of my favorites. So you were sharing about how, like, when you make a post on Instagram, how you're just worried about people disagreeing or comments, and you're sharing a few other things along those lines, if I remember right. When you make decisions on the business side, whether it's trying to help the environment, how do you find the balance of doing what you guys feel right and also dealing with backlash before you make the decisions and when you announce them?
Yeah, that is a great question, and I didn't spend time on that, so I'm glad it came up in this Q&A, because I think Sundance is really a great example of a business or a place where it serves so many purposes to so many different people, right? If you just look at it, even just from a recreation standpoint, there are some people who say, or maybe who think, Sundance should only be for mountain bikers. Or some might say, it should only be for hikers, right? And you've probably seen we've tried to differentiate that on the mountain. You don't want to have hiking trails and mountain biking trails in the same trail. That'd be a problem, right? So we've tried to balance that and tried to make Sundance from a nature environmental standpoint appeal to different people in different ways. I guess another example would be, my wife, I love downhill skiing. I mean, yeah, I like cross country too, but my wife only likes cross country skiing. So you could kind of go through every aspect of Sundance and kind of figure out how everybody feels differently about what it should be. So to your point, how do we make those decisions when we're making an announcement? I mean, what we have found with social media, right, is there's strong opinions that people have out there, and they're not afraid to share it, right? So yesterday's post is a great example. If you go on and look at our Instagram reel yesterday and read, I mean, the majority are positive, but there are some who are like, oh, we love this, we love this, we love this. Others are like, they think we're horrible, either because we've expanded parking or because we're charging for parking on weekends or whatever it might be, right? So to answer the question, what we've always tried to do, or what I've always tried to do at Sundance, is make the decisions as to what is best for the environment, but what also allows us to be a sustainable business, right? I mean, what's best for the environment is if nothing would have ever been developed up there, right? I mean, just leaving it completely natural. But the reality is people do want recreational opportunities. They do want ways to, experience and enjoy nature. I think our zip line is a pretty good example of that. We wanted to add another activity quite a few years ago, and we actually studied different things and found that a zip line was something that fit very nicely because it had very little impact to the environment. The mountain was set up very naturally for it, the peaks, the valleys, and so forth, so we didn't have to build these large towers or anything like that. It just fit into the natural landscape, but it gave, again, guests an opportunity to literally fly over Sundance, and that's the way some people want to enjoy scenery and be connected to nature. Others might just want to hike, like I mentioned, whatever it might be. So again, we always have to be careful too. I mean, Robert Redford used to say to me, we can't be all things to all people, right? As a business or whatever you're doing, you've got to be careful that you're not trying to be all things to all people. But my hope is that any individual finds the way that they would like to connect with nature, and we hope that they can find that connection point at Sundance. So again, to me the answer is do what's best for the environment, that also allows us to be a sustainable business.
Yeah. Great, who's next? Okay, sure. Or there's someone in the back first. Go.
I'm just jumping in if nobody wants to.
Hi, is this, yeah, it's on. Okay, this is for Ben. So I'm Brock Jones, I teach poetry here, writing, creative writing. And you can probably ask my students how often I ranted about the Utah Lake proposal, especially in my eco-poetry class. The question that I have is beyond, ranting about the problems, what can students do to be involved in, say, the going forward of any, decisions made about Utah Lake, for example?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that's a really important question, and I wish I would have touched on that a little more, actually. I think the engagement is crucial. There's a lot going on, and if you're not looking, then you're going to miss something. And so if you'd like to stay engaged, there's several opportunities. As I mentioned at the end, there's a great opportunity coming up to engage with our comprehensive management planning, which truly shapes the future of how we manage the resources moving forward. But there's also a lot of other ways to engage. I would encourage you to engage in your city councils, in your local government, vote. There's many ways to do this. Go to these public meetings where people are discussing these issues, so you can learn more about them and take the time to get to get comfortable with them and understand them. And then don't be afraid to speak up if your gut's telling you it's not right.
I think this is maybe related to what you just said. And I don't know how hard or easy this question is, just one I guess I have. This is for Ben. So I guess I'm wondering, right, I think it's kind of not a secret, right, that there is a lot of controversy about federally owned land, I think especially in Utah and other states, and that I think I thought it was very important that you said a few times, right, that these are public lands, so they're in a sense our lands, but I do get the impression that there is a sentiment among a lot of people that precisely these lands kind of are taken from us if they become federal lands. And so I know, read that in your case they're state lands, but I guess it's a two-pronged question. So one, do you feel there's a similar sentiment with state-owned lands, or is it very different from federally owned lands? And if there is, I guess what would you say to people if they feel but these lands are kind of taken from us, I guess?
Well, I guess that's another good question. I would ask you, when you think of public lands, what do you all think of? What agency do you think of when you think of public lands? You can shout it out if you'd like. Anybody?
I heard National Parks over here.
National Park, anybody else? BLM, Forest Service, those are all federal agencies. And so the reason I wanted to ask that is because that's usually the answer. When you talk about federal lands, those are the lands that most of you are familiar with. When you go up here in the forest, when you're going up to Sundance, you're likely passing through federal lands. So I don't believe they're taken from us. I think there's opportunities where we could potentially invest more into our lands, and that's the same with the state. Hilary and I were discussing earlier that a lot of times it's simply giving the resources to the land managers that they need. So when you look at things, when you're voting on issues or when you're electing folks, looking at the issues that they advocate for and understanding where they invest is important. But I don't look at federal lands as being taken from us. I spend a lot of time on federal lands, and I'd say they're very accessible. When I said that these state lands, these sovereign lands, are the most public of public lands, the reason I say that is because we can't dispose of them. As I explained in the Island project, we feel that these lands are meant to be utilized for the public benefit forever, in perpetuity. Whereas with federal lands, there's opportunity to dispose of lands or exchange lands more easily. So I believe these lands are more protected, if that makes sense.
Yes. Bring you the mic. So we can get it recorded.
I personally have a lot of anxiety about the Great Salt Lake and how its health, and I know that the legislature has allocated money, but I guess kind of a follow-up of what can we do, but also what do you think? What are we going to do?
Yeah. That's another really great question because I don't know that we totally have the answers for that. We're still learning a lot about the lake. The measures that the legislature has taken and the measures that we're taking as a state to try to care for the lake, they are having an impact. And I think that it's going to take some time to realize the impact. You know, ultimately, Mother Nature is going to be the one that takes care of us. And I do believe that these weather patterns are somewhat cyclical, but we divert a lot of water. And so we need to not divert so much water. So what can we do? I think that the answer there is we need to try to conserve water where we can. And I know that, you know, municipal industrial uses are a lot smaller bit of the, you know, piece of the picture. But I think the way that you spend your money, the items we consume, you know, how we recreate, I mean, everything that we do has an impact on this. So I would say conserve water. You know, if you have an opportunity to flip your strip or xeriscape your yard, those are all great opportunities that we can show that these things matter to us. And then again, you know, voice your opinions to your representatives. These folks, you're their constituents, and if this is important to you, you have a voice, and I think it's important to let them know that this matters to the state. And they'll continue to take those measures.
Can I just add something to that? Ben and I were talking earlier, I mean, snowfall is a big part of this, right? And we had a lot of, since I'm in the ski industry, I'll talk about snow. We've had a lot of years where we didn't have great snowfall. Of course, you all know last year was a record-setting year. Our highest amount of snowfall ever at Sundance was 390 inches. And this last year we hit 511 inches. So it wasn't just a little bit more, it was a lot more. And I was joking with Ben that our team, you know, prior to last year, our team at Sundance always said there's no such thing as too much of a good thing, meaning too much snow. Well, we feel differently now. You know, we think we kind of hit a point where it's like, that was almost too much snow. But I think that's a result of climate change, and we're just seeing different trends of the way snow comes, drought years, big years, starts earlier, goes later. There's just a variety of things. So that's one thing I want to say. And then I think as an example of a business like Sundance, what we've tried to do is, and we're not completely done with this, but converting all of our toilets to low-flow toilets. We've changed our watering patterns in all of the landscape areas at Sundance. We've actually given up some of our areas that used to be grass, you know, like manicured grass, and left it go natural so it doesn't require watering. So we've made a concerted effort to say we want to reduce, you know, our water footprint as well.
And I'd realize I didn't answer part of your question as Chad was speaking. These collective efforts are what help solve the problem. Like one home doesn't make a huge difference, but when we collectively do these things, they do make a difference. I just wanted to also touch on some of the policies that have been enacted because I think that's really important. Some of the things that don't result in physical wet water into the Great Salt Lake. You may know this already, so I won't make it long, but there's a lot of laws that weren't in place that didn't allow the state to even own water for the ecological needs of the lake. So HB 33 that was passed, I think in the 2022 general session, allows our division to hold water rights for the beneficial use of the Great Salt Lake. It doesn't have to be for watering fields or municipal use. We can now just hold water rights. So that opened the door to allow our division to go, potentially seek donations. Like the LDS Church donated 20,000 acre feet to our division. There's also the Water Trust, which was stood up with a starting funds of $40 million, which allows them to go out and actually buy water. When I talked about our lithium rules, there's a recent legislation, I think again in 2022, that enacted a law that says that all of the revenue we generate on our resources, so Great Salt Lake, which is currently generating upwards of $10 million per year, is now dedicated for the Great Salt Lake. So if we start to produce lithium, this is a highly valuable commodity, and we could be producing revenue in the range of 10 to $50 million if we even just had one single producer. And so this is a big opportunity for the lake, but we've decided that we can't let lithium to be developed at the expense of the lake. So if we can do both, if we can develop lithium with the extractive industry and do it in a way that does not harm the lake, this creates a great opportunity to fund restoration, buy water, and do other things that would ultimately end up benefiting the lake. So again, I came from the environmental science discipline, and when I left school, I had some pretty strong opinions. And as I've been working in this field for a while, I've come to this realization realization that, you know, there truly is a balance, and we're all guilty of using things like automobiles, and I'll bet you most of you have an iPhone in your pocket, and so we contribute to these issues. And so I think if we can, you know, have oversight of them and ensure that they're done in a responsible manner, that's stewardship to me, and that's true environmentalism. So I think we take a lot of scrutiny for even thinking about developing lithium on the Great Salt Lake. But I assure you, if you read our rules that are posted right now, you'll see that we're putting this out there in a way that truly cares for the lake, and hopefully this generates that revenue stream to put back into the lake.
We have questions in the back here.
Keeping in the same line of water conservation, I was wondering if you could help impart a little bit of optimism about the interstate conversation about the Colorado River and the way that Utah, the way that Utah handles the water and what happens downstream as well, and if it's not going to be so dire as it seemed last year.
Yeah. I wish I had you know, more information to share on that. I'll tell you what I know, and that's that, you know, we've probably over allocated the Colorado River system, and so we're lucky that we had a great snowpack, because what that snowpack did was it filled up a lot of our reservoirs and it bought us some time. But ultimately, there's some tough negotiations and tough discussions that are going to have to happen if we want to see the Colorado River be sustainable, you know, there's a lot of talk. I saw an article the other day about, you know, importing water into the state again, and I think that it's fine and it's fair to explore these solutions, but, you know, we do need to be cognizant of the impacts that we put in other places, and moving water from one, you know, drought-stricken region to another is perhaps a complex way to do things. So I think that, again, focusing in on conservation, whether it's through agriculture, you know, municipal, industrial, that's how we're going to get out of this. But we do have to have some really tough discussions, again, with our, you know, these interstate compacts.
I was wondering how you might close the gap from getting someone on board to voting environmentally, and just not ever caring for the environment. Because I think that there's a big bridge that I think I've built for myself, and like try to practice scientific literacy and whatnot. But I think that there's a large majority of Utah that doesn't really put the environment first. And I think there are changes happening, but how would you recommend, from both of your perspective, from business and from the state's lands and whatnot, what do you recommend on an individual level? How can we help those around us understand the significance? And, you know, because I think that starting with things like single-use plastic and things is a huge thing, especially on grand scale business, but I don't know. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I've got maybe a quick answer, and you've got probably the more science answer, but from I guess from a business standpoint, as Sundance, or even just a Utah resident, my wife and I sometimes will go out and to take a hike, and my wife's almost frustrated because there's so many people out hiking. But I always tease her, I'm like, well, it's not just your trail, like, you know, it's public lands or whatever, right? But I think in a way, the more that all of us as residents of this amazing state, the more that we're out hiking, there's a lot of people, and I'm guessing not you, but there's a lot of people that live here that don't get to enjoy nature as much, right? They just don't make an effort to get out there. But I think the more you're out there, the more you connect, the more you feel invested, and that makes you want to preserve more, right? And I think that's maybe a small role that Sundance can play, is hopefully giving people that access to an experience in nature that then causes them to say, listen, I want to start supporting these initiatives that are going to protect this resource, right? So if you don't understand how great a resource is because you're not out there enjoying it, you may not be as likely, like you said, to vote for something that's going to help support that initiative. So that's what came to my mind as you were asking that question. I'm sure you maybe have a more in-depth answer, but I guess, you know, to me, it's just like, let's encourage people to enjoy nature first and foremost, right? We all need to fall in love and recognize what an amazing resource we have, and that'll inspire people to protect it.
That's a great answer, and I think that you're exactly right. We need to get people to experience these resources to care for them. And what I was thinking before Chad said that is, like, I'd like to give you an example, which is, you know, if you look back 5 or 10 years ago, people just simply didn't, well, I won't say people, but there wasn't a whole lot of care for the Great Salt Lake, right? Like, there was this narrative out there that every drop of water that went to the lake was a wasted drop of water, and the, you know, the economic benefits of the lake, that was just the bonus, right? And so nobody cared what happened to the lake. But what changed that is that as the lake started to dry and we hit record lows, we started to see dust, and that started to appeal to their own ethics. Maybe they don't care about the lake, but they were starting to think, well, geez, this is really going to start to impact me. And so I think that when we're doing these things, you have to appeal to people's ethics, and whether that's getting them out there to experience nature or the environment and starting to care for it, because now they start to see that, wow, look at all these birds that are using this. This isn't just me. I really care that they're there. Or this dust is going to affect myself, my health, my children, the prosperity of my community. People start to care. So I would say just making those connections on how you appeal to other folks' ethics and their values.
That was, thanks. That was such a great place to end it. Thank you so much for your time today, and thank you all for coming. Let's give them one last round of applause.
Thanks, everybody.